The village of Obio-Umu awoke beneath a sky the color of ash, as if the heavens themselves had been smothered by a heavy, invisible hand. A thick, cold mist crawled across the ground, seeping into cracks in the mud huts and winding around the legs of sleeping villagers like living fingers. The morning air, usually alive with birdsong and children's laughter, was unnervingly still. Even the gentle rustle of leaves had vanished. Inside her small, dim hut, Zara sat motionless on her mat, her knees pulled tightly to her chest. Her eyes were wide, hollow, and unblinking, reflecting the faint light of a dying candle. Her chest heaved painfully. Every beat of her heart echoed like a drum in her ears, wild, desperate, and panicked. All night, the whisper had followed her. The sacrifice must be completed. Every time she closed her eyes, it returned, slow, deep, patient, like the forest itself was breathing into her mind. She pressed her hands over her ears, trying to shut it out, but the sound seeped through her fingers, curling around her skull. Her breath trembled. What do you want from me?" she whispered, her voice shaking so violently it echoed off the bare walls. The air grew colder, and the shadows along the walls stretched and twisted unnaturally. Each corner of the room seemed alive, moving in subtle, sinister ways. The walls seemed to lean closer. The darkness was watching. Then, softly, dangerously, a voice emerged from the silence. "Bring her." The word was not loud, yet it struck Zara like a thunderclap. Her body went rigid. Every muscle tightened as if she had been struck by ice. Her blood ran cold. Every instinct screamed for her to flee, yet her legs refused to move. She shivered violently, feeling the forest's presence pressing against her mind. It was not outside yet. It was in her head. It was in her soul. Zara's gaze fell to the small mirror across the hut. She saw herself, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror, lips trembling, her hands covered in faintly glowing red symbols, the same symbols she had seen carved into the ancient shrine the night before. Her mind raced. Amara, it has to be her, the one the forest wants. It's her or everyone. The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through her. She clutched her stomach, biting back a scream. Every instinct in her screamed to run, but she knew she could not. Not yet. Not while the forest had chosen. The candle flickered violently, casting jagged shadows across the walls, twisting into shapes she did not recognize. Each shadow seemed to reach toward her, tendrils of darkness probing, testing her courage. The wind outside rose suddenly, howling through the narrow cracks of the hut. The sound was not natural, it carried whispers, unintelligible but menacing, like 1,000 voices murmuring a single terrible command. Zara felt a pull in her chest, a magnet dragging her toward the forest. She struggled against it, gripping her knees tighter, tears streaming down her face. I can't. I can't do this," she whispered, voice breaking. The wind howled again, and the whisper came closer, wrapping around her, squeezing her lungs, clawing at her thoughts. "Bring her." It was no longer a suggestion. It was a command. Zara's eyes darted around the room. Every shadow, every flicker of the candle, every corner of the hut seemed alive. She saw shapes, branches twisting like fingers, leaves writhing like snakes, faint glimpses of eyes glowing in the dark. Her knees buckled. She collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Her hands shook violently. She pressed them to her face, trying to block out the sight of the shadows, the memory of Amara's terrified gaze from the night before, the red symbols etched into her palm, pulsing, alive. And then, a new sound pierced the silence, the heartbeat. Not her own, not Amara's. Something else, slow, deliberate, deep. It echoed in the walls, the floor, the very air itself. Zara froze. Every hair on her body stood on end. The heartbeat grew louder, closer. The shadows converged toward her. The forest outside had begun to move. It was watching. It was waiting. Zara whispered through trembling lips. I don't want to hurt her. I didn't mean for any of this. The candle guttered and went out. Darkness swallowed her entirely. And in that suffocating blackness, she knew one terrifying truth. The forest of no return was awake. And it wanted its due. The village of Obio-Umu had never felt so still. The usual bustle of morning life, the clatter of pots, the chatter of children, the songs of the elders preparing for the festival, had vanished. In its place hung a heavy, suffocating silence, broken only by the shallow, trembling breaths of Amara. She lay on her mat, her body almost ghostly under the dim light of the hut. Her skin glowed with the sickly sheen of fever. Her lips quivered as though whispering words to someone beyond the living world, words only the unseen forces could hear. Her chest rose and fell weakly, each breath a struggle, each heartbeat a fragile, fleeting flame. The healer, a tall, weathered man with eyes as sharp as broken flint, leaned over her. His hands hovered above her body, trembling slightly as though he too feared the invisible presence that clung to her. The village elders gathered around, faces etched with worry and disbelief. This, the healer said slowly, his voice almost a whisper, this is not an ordinary curse. The crowd stirred uneasily. Whispers rippled through the villagers, low and tense. Some crossed themselves. Some prayed quietly. Others simply stared at Amara, unable to comprehend the terror before them. He cleared his throat, and the words that followed struck the air like a dagger. It is a binding ritual. A ritual fueled by jealousy, sealed by betrayal, and fed by sacrifice. The villagers gasped, a collective shudder running through the crowd. Mothers clutched their children. Fathers gripped their walking sticks. Even the bravest among them turned pale. Amara's mother sank to the ground beside her daughter, sobbing uncontrollably, her face buried in the folds of Amara's clothes. Please, someone, anyone, save her, she begged, her voice shaking with despair. The healer's eyes darted nervously around the crowd. He hesitated, as though speaking the next words could summon something far worse than the ritual itself. Then, in a voice that made the villagers' hearts freeze, he said, "There is only one way." The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. Every villager froze, holding their breath. Even the wind seemed to stop, leaving the village trapped in an unnatural, tense stillness. The one who awakened the forest must return to it. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Every eye in the crowd shifted toward Zara, who stood frozen like a statue at the edge of the gathering. Her legs weakened beneath her. Her palms were cold and damp. Her throat felt dry as sandpaper. Her heart thundered violently in her chest, echoing in her ears. Return to the forest. The words were simple, but their meaning was terrifying. The forest of no return, the place the elders had always warned them about, the place whispered about in fearful tones, was calling her. It demanded a price. The healer's gaze swept slowly across the crowd. Then, deliberately, it stopped. His eyes locked onto Zara's. Everything went still. The air seemed to thicken around her. She could hear her own heartbeat, rapid and panicked. The shadows of the hut seemed to lean closer, stretching like long, dark fingers toward her. Her stomach churned violently. In that instant, she knew. The forest had already exposed her. Her secret, her jealousy, her betrayal, everything she had tried to hide, had been seen by something far older, far darker, and far more merciless than she could have imagined. The villagers' murmurs faded into nothingness as Zora's world narrowed to a single terrifying thought. She had no choice. The forest wanted its due. And it would not wait. Night had fallen over Obio-Umu like a heavy, suffocating blanket. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the village paths, and the wind carried whispers that made the hairs on Zora's arms stand on end. The moon, hidden behind thick clouds, offered no light. Only darkness, thick and absolute. Zara moved like a ghost, her bare feet barely brushing the earth as she crept toward the edge of the village. Her hands shook violently as she packed a small cloth bag with a few meager belongings, some dried cassava, a water gourd, a small knife. Every movement felt like a betrayal to the silence that had settled over the night. Her heart pounded like a drum. Her breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. Every step she took was measured, desperate, as though the forest itself was following her, listening. She reached the last hut, the threshold between the village and the unknown. Relief surged briefly through her veins. She might escape, she might have a chance to undo what had been done. But before her foot could touch the open path beyond the hut, a sudden burning pain tore across her palm. She screamed, a sound that cut through the night, echoing off the mud walls. Dropping the bag, she stared in horror. Across her skin, a glowing red symbol was forming, curling and twisting like a living thing. Its lines pulsed with an eerie rhythm, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. Her eyes widened. She recognized it immediately. The same symbol carved into the forbidden shrine. The one that had whispered promises of power and demanded blood. It's burning, she whispered, voice trembling. The symbol throbbed violently, each pulse sending a wave of pain up her arm. It was as if the forest had claimed her, marking her as the chosen, as the one who must pay the price. She fell to her knees, clutching her hand, tears streaming freely down her face. I'm sorry. Amara. I didn't mean, she sobbed, her voice breaking. But the forest did not answer. There was no mercy. Only darkness. Only the slow tightening of an invisible grip around her mind, her chest, her very soul. From deep within the trees, a low growl echoed. Slow. Ancient. Hungry. It roared across the village, vibrating through the ground, rattling doors and making the mud walls tremble. Zara froze, every nerve screaming. The shadows along the hut stretched and twisted, writhing like living things. The wind swirled around her, carrying voices she could almost understand, whispers of warning, of demand, of ancient hunger. Zara's chest heaved. Her knees dug into the cold earth. Her fingers clenched into fists, but the pain of the symbol was relentless, pulsing with dark intent. It was in that moment, clutching her burning hand, that Zara understood the terrible truth. There was no running. There was no hiding. The forest of no return had claimed her. And it would not release her until its demands were met. Her sobs mingled with the whispering wind, carrying her fear into the night. Somewhere deep in the forest, the ancient presence shifted, as though aware of her panic, as though it was savoring it. Its hunger grew. Its patience remained. And Zara realized with a sinking heart. The night was only beginning. The night in Obio-Umu was unnaturally still, thick with shadows that clung to every corner. Even the wind seemed afraid to move. Every hut, every mud wall, every tree in the village felt heavy, as if weighed down by an unseen presence. Zara moved like a ghost, each step slow and deliberate, her bare feet brushing against the cold, uneven ground. Her chest heaved with guilt, her throat raw from sobbing in silence. Each heartbeat pounded in her ears like a warning bell. She had tried to hide what she had done, but the weight of her betrayal was unbearable. Her mind raced. Memories of Amara's laughter, her trust, her radiant smile, they haunted her. Every compliment Amara had received, every moment of admiration she had basked in, now seemed like daggers piercing Zara's conscience. And worse, the forest had seen everything. Her hands trembled as she reached Amara's hut. The door creaked open with a sound so loud it felt like thunder in the silent night. Candlelight flickered inside, casting weak golden glows on the mud walls, barely illuminating Amara lying on her mat. She looked fragile, like a bird broken in the storm. Her breathing was shallow, her face pale, almost translucent. Zara knelt beside her, tears pouring freely down her face, soaking the sleeves of her dress. Her voice shook, cracking with each word. I did this, she whispered, almost more to herself than to Amara. Amara stared weakly. Her eyes fluttered open, hazy and unfocused. Zara, she murmured, her voice fragile like glass. The words made Zara's heart twist in pain. She pressed her hands over her face for a moment, then took a deep, shuddering breath and spoke again. I was jealous. I was angry. I wanted to shine. I wanted to be admired. But I never meant for this to happen. Her confession spilled out in broken fragments, each word a dagger of guilt. She looked at Amara, whose confusion slowly twisted into pain. You betrayed me. Amara whispered, her voice barely audible, trembling with hurt. Zara nodded, her entire body trembling. Her tears fell freely, leaving streaks of grief on her cheeks. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating, pressing down on them like the weight of 1,000 hands. Zara could feel the forest outside, alive and waiting, listening. I trusted you, Amara finally said, her words soft but heavy, carrying the weight of heartbreak. Those 3 words shattered Zara completely. Her knees gave way, and she collapsed beside her friend. She sobbed uncontrollably, her body shaking, racked with guilt and fear. Outside, the wind began to howl violently. Candles flickered wildly, sending shadows leaping across the walls. The mud walls trembled as if the forest itself were pressing against them. Leaves rattled against the hot tin roof, whispering threats in a language Zara felt she could almost understand. Every instinct screamed at her, the forest had heard everything. Every word, every tear, every confession was now etched into its memory. And the forest did not forgive. Deep in the shadows of the trees, a presence stirred, slow, deliberate, and hungry. Its unseen eyes glimmered, watching, calculating. Every branch that bent in the wind was a finger pointing toward them. Every rustle of leaves was a heartbeat growing louder, closer, inexorable. Zara pressed herself against Amara, trying to shield her from the unseen threat, yet knowing in her heart that no human strength could protect them. The forest wanted its due, and it would not wait. She whispered brokenly, her lips trembling. I will do whatever it asks, just don't take her. But the answer came only in the form of silence, broken by a low, distant growl rolling through the night, vibrating through the walls, the ground, and into their very bones. And Zara knew with sinking horror, the forest had claimed its death. The night was far from over. It had only just begun. Thunder split the sky, sharp and deafening, shaking the very ground beneath Obio-Umu. The wind howled like a pack of wild beasts, rattling doors and roofs, tossing scraps of wood and clay across the village paths. Mothers screamed, clutching their children, while elders ran frantically, eyes wide with fear. The festival preparations, the laughter, the music, all were gone, replaced by chaos and dread. From the edge of the village, a thick, black mist began to roll forward. It moved unnaturally, slithering across the ground as though it had a mind of its own. The villagers froze in terror as the mist crept around mud huts, curling through cracks in the walls, swallowing shadows, and blotting out the weak light of flickering lanterns. The forest of no return was advancing. Roots burst violently from the soil, cracking the earth, snaking outward like hungry serpents. Trees groaned as if alive, their branches thrashing violently, clawing at the sky. The ground trembled beneath the villagers' feet, sending pebbles and dust skittering across the path. The village healer staggered backward, his face pale and drawn. His voice trembled as he whispered, almost inaudibly. It's begun. Zara stood frozen near Amara's hut, her chest heaving, her glowing palm burning hotter than a living flame. The symbol that marked her was no longer just a warning, it pulsed with a terrifying life of its own, demanding action. Every beat of her heart echoed the forest's hunger. The whisper returned, cutting through the chaos, louder and sharper than ever. Now, bring her. Zara's eyes widened in horror. Her body trembled uncontrollably. The forest was no longer waiting, it was haunting. Every shadow shifted unnaturally, stretching toward her, following her movements, as if aware of her fear. The black mist moved like a living predator, pressing closer to the huts, enveloping everything in its path. Amara stirred weakly on her mat, shivering under the cold gust that slipped through broken windows. Zara's heart clenched. Every instinct screamed, she had to obey, she had to act, or the village would be devoured by the forest's wrath. The earth groaned beneath her feet. Dust and leaves swirled violently, forming twisting shapes in the air that resembled reaching hands and snarling faces. Shadows danced across the walls and the ground like living creatures. The mist hissed and roared as it crept closer to Amara. Zara's legs shook. Her breath came in short, jagged gasps. She pressed a hand against her chest, fighting the terror that threatened to paralyze her entirely. She knew she had no choice. The forest demanded her compliance. If she refused, everything she loved would be destroyed. Taking a trembling step forward, her glowing palms still searing with the mark of the chosen, Zara whispered, almost to herself. I have no choice. I must do this. The mist shifted, rolling closer, almost tasting the fear emanating from the girl. Roots twisted and writhed across the village path. Branches bent unnaturally, forming a wall of green and black, separating the villagers from the advancing horror. Every heartbeat thundered in her ears. Every shadow seemed alive. Every breath carried the weight of inevitability. Zara's trembling legs moved slowly, her gaze fixed on the forest, on Amara, on her unavoidable fate. Step by step, she walked toward the forest of no return, toward the darkness, toward the destiny darker than death. The wind screamed. The ground quaked. The mist roared. And deep within the trees, something ancient stirred, a presence older than the village, hungrier than any living thing, and impossibly patient. The forest had awakened. And it would not rest. The villagers' fate hangs in the balance. Zara's next choice will either save them, or doom them all. Episode 4 will change everything. Will Zara sacrifice herself to save Amara? Will the forest spare the village? Or will jealousy finally destroy everything? Would you like to see another episode of this story? Please like and subscribe and tell us in the comments where you are watching from.